I this morning treated myself to a bouquet of flowers from Trader Joe's. And I'm going to be playing with a few of these today, and I'm going to be taking the flower apart and kind of understanding all of the parts of this. And to help me with this, we have a worksheet today. Now, if you go to the chat, or if this is a recording, to the show notes below, you'll find a link to this. So I suggest you print this out. It's going to have all the names and some structure on it that will help you, and then we'll just be sort of connecting lines to things, and this will help you kind of keep yourself oriented and kind of get your parts of a flower. And I'm going to start by just sort of thinking of there's a bunch of different types of flowers in my bouquet here. And I'm going to choose one of these flowers that has a specific structure. So I'm going to be looking at one that has a superior ovary. And so that is my big lily here. I'm going to start by kind of dissecting this lily. And what as I do, we're going to sort of see the parts of the flower. I'm going to make a little diagram over here on my piece of paper so that you can, as you're looking at your flowers, you can, if you already know some stuff about flowers, you can go like, yeah, this one's a superior ovary, this one's an inferior ovary. If you have one that has a superior ovary, grab that. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I'm about to tell you. And then we'll be able to follow along here. Let's jump to this can. The ovary is the part of the flower where the seeds develop and are made, and it usually kind of looks like some sort of a sort of swollen ball in the flower. If on my flower, here's my stem coming down here, which we call a pedicel in botany land.
Jack, would it be possible to zoom in just one?
Yeah, but zoom here. Right. So the idea here is there's what people call a superior or an inferior ovary. The superior ovary means that the ovary, this is the ovary, I'll put an O in it, is above where the flower comes in. So if I have a flower that connects like this from down here, the ovary is above that flower. Right? If, on the other hand, that would be a superior ovary. If, on the other hand, my flower connects on the top of the ovary like this, right? Then the ovary is below the flower. That's called an inferior ovary. So if I look at my flower, and I can see I have flower, and then there's my ovary right down there, right? That's an inferior ovary. If I look from the side, if I look at my flower, and I've got my stem or my pedicel coming up, and then it goes right into flower, it's probably an ovary hiding right inside there. Whoops, we're not on the screen. Ah, there it is. So if I have my flower coming up and I just sort of see the side of the flower, there's probably an ovary hiding right inside there. That's going to be a superior ovary. So if I take a look at these two flowers here, take look at that and tell me if you see an ovary or not, or what may be an ovary. Yep, that's the ovary. And so on this one here, can you see an ovary? Nope, don't see an ovary. So here, this little bump here, that's the ovary. There's the flower above it. So this is an inferior ovary. The ovary is below. This one here, I look at it from the side, I go, there's got to be some kind of ovary thing going on in there. This one here is a superior ovary. My dad always called my mom the superior ovary. And there we go. So I'm going to choose this one here. I'm going to choose this one here, and it is a flower with a superior ovary. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to be dissecting it and diagramming it here on this, in this box right here. It says flower structure. If you don't have this page printed out, it'll be easy enough to follow along, but you might find it's cool just to have this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start from the bottom and we're going to work our way kind of on up here. And the flower is going to be organized into several rings. So if I look at the flower from the top, you see there's a bunch of stuff in the center. And if you look carefully, I have 3 petals here. And then these ones here are on the outside of those. So there's a ring. This stuff is in the middle. Then these ones are further out, boom, boom, boom. And then these ones are further out. So I'm going to just make a little diagram of this from the top. I'm going to have, there'll be stuff from the center. Then there will be another ring of plant structures and parts around that. And another ring of plant structures and parts around that, going further towards the outside. And if I'm looking at this from the top, or sorry, from the side, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have my little pedicel coming up, and it's going to tuck into what's called a receptacle. And the receptacle is sometimes a large part, it's sometimes a swollen part, sometimes it's just a little flat, small platform. But this is the place on the flower where all of the parts of my flower are going to attach into. So think of it as like the landing pad. So on this little one that I've got here, I have my stem coming up, and the name for the stem is the pedicel. And if you forget that, you can remember it because it's written right there. It says pedicel. So that's your little stem. And so I'm going to draw a little line going over to that. And on some plants, there's sometimes a large receptacle. On this one here, it's a rather sort of small zone, so they're kind of tightly connecting in there together. But for the purposes of this little diagram here, I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger. And I'm going to draw a line with a ball. I like to put a ball on the end of my lines because it looks cool. So there's my my pedicel, my receptacle. And as we go, well, now what I'm going to do is on this receptacle, remember these little circles that we talked about? The one in the center here, that one connects right on the top. So there'll be something sticking out right in the middle here. And these other rings, if we take this and we superimpose it down here, here's one ring coming down here. Think of it like a birthday cake or a layer cake. There'll be one set of materials that are attached on the bottom here, and the next will be attached above that, the next will be attached above that, the next will be right there smack dab in the middle. So we're going to get a series of layers of flower structures. So as I look at this, I notice that some of these petals are on the outside and some of them are tucked on the inside. Like you see this one here with the white rib down the middle? That one is tucked behind these two. So these ones without the rib on it, those are on the outside. So those are on the outside layer. And then the others are tucked inside of them. As a matter of fact, if I look at the bud of a lily, what I see is this big piece here. This is one of these outside. Here's another outside one. I have the other outside one over here. There are three big outside ones. You can see on the top here, those three bumps here. Those are the three big outside, the outer layer of those. If I am looking at, I don't have one of these, one of these guys in bud. I was hoping that I would, but I don't. All right, that's all right. So this outer layer, I'm going to remove a few pieces of this outer layer. So I'm going to take, I'm looking at my flower and I'm going to just take off these three outside ones and I'm going to leave the inside ones. All right, so I'm taking off this one here. And there's how it looks. I'm going to rotate it around. Here's another one that's on the outside. I'm going to take that one off. And then I'm going to take this one off. So they all have this kind of cool pattern on the inside. It's a little line that is coming up here, a little pale spot right in there. All right. So that is, these are my first layers. And so what I'm going to do is on here, I am going to draw in just a little line going across. And I'm going to draw sort of a side view of this structure going up. Let's actually name this structure. This outside layer, this bottom ones, these are called the sepals. This is a sepal. A sepal is this first layer around these flowers here. And sometimes sepals are green and they look very leafy. And on other plants, they look very much like a petal. So this is a petaloid sepal. On a lot of plants where you can't really tell the difference between petals and sepals, these are petals, by the way, spoiler alert. These are going to be your petals. There's 3 petals on this, not 6. The outside ones are the sepals. Sometimes when people can't tell the difference between petals and sepals, they call them tepals. But here, by the placement of them and the difference in the structure of them, I can look at this and say, like, yeah, this is my sepal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw my sepal in kind of on the side here. And it's coming down to this bottom layer here. And I might stick one in on the other side. And I'm going to make this more of a side view so I can have it clearly kind of show that it's kind of coming in right there. And let's draw a little line from sepals to this structure. If I refer to all the sepals together, you'll hear botanists often use the word calyx. So that's why that's written on there. Calyx is all of the sepals together. So if you're following along, you want to be taking a look at these flowers. And if you've got a flower that also has a superior ovary, you're following along and kind of you can be finding those same structures on your flower. We're now going to go the next step up. And so also kind of a useful thing for me to do at this point, if I'm kind of diagramming these at home, I can put my finger lightly on it, and I'm going to trace around the edge, get myself the basic shape of that. I trace a lot. And I don't feel bad about it. When I get up to the end, I am going to notice the shape of that. I'm going to see how high this little part in the center. That's cool, little shape there. And it comes down here. I would want to take some time and make a diagram sort of showing what this shape is. Maybe make this line a little bit lighter up on the top. It'd be fun to add some color into that too. A few little grooves on this. Now, remember, some of the things we can record with our pictures, and others, it's best to record them using words. So I'm going to, down here in the bottom of this, sort of show the thickness and a little bit of a cross section of this. And I'm going to write, this is thick. It's rubbery. I'm going to draw a slight little kind of bumpy texture into part of it, and then draw a box around that and pull that out to say bumpy texture. And these are indented grooves. I definitely want to get some color in on this. I'll do that later off screen. So I'm using my words, pictures. If I could also measure this and start to get my numbers in there. So how many centimeters long is this? My words, pictures, and numbers going, that is 93 millimeters. So I'm going to draw a little line out there, a little line out there. And write 93 millimeters. Hooray for the metric system. So what I'm going to do is just, when I have the time, I'm going to be putting some watercolor on this. I want to just explore this and then just write, this is my sepal. And I'm going to put that there are 3 of them. So I'm counting parts. So look at that, words, pictures, numbers, and look, I painted it. No. All right, now let's go up a level. Right. I've got these 3. Yep, those are the petals. So the next 3 in here are the petals, and look at how they're set up. So I pull that off, and I pull that off, and I pull that off. Hey, welcome, honey. Grab a seat. And this is for you. All right. So if you're just arriving, we are kind of going up in layers in this. I've taken these 3 sepals off of my flower, and I've just pulled off my first petal. And look at how different the sepal is from, oh, sorry, so here's a sepal, and here's a petal. Look at how different the sepals are from the petals. This one is so much wider, very different on this back side. There's that big rib. This one has a bump here. This one doesn't. I think I really need to draw these ones from the, and also look, this one has more of a curve to it. Isn't that interesting? This guy is straighter. This one has more of a curve. The sepal has more of a curve. So when you've got two objects together, you can start to do what's called a joint comparison. How is this different than this? And when you've got two side by side, the differences in one really, really stand out. I'm going to first diagram that onto here. And as I do, I'm going to switch my pencil color. I have it going purple. To make this less confusing, I am now going to put in a blue line here. And I am going to draw coming up from here. So this side view of this blue petal coming in here. And let's have this one overlap there. So I'm going to erase that little line right there. I'm going to have this.
Can you slide your page down just slightly when you get a moment?
Yes, yeah. I'm going to come in here. And that is my next row. So I've got one row, I've got two rows. All the petals together are called the corolla. And if I were to diagram one of my petals, it'd probably be easier for me to hold it this way. Look at this easy trace. And then here's the back side of my petal. That really strong rib. I wonder why the sepal doesn't have this big, strong, reinforcing rib in it, and the petal does. Interesting difference between them. So I would be doing the same thing here. I can add color to this if I want. On this, I think it's going to be really interesting to do a cross section. So look at this. I'm going to take my, let's do a cross section of the sepal and then a cross section of the petal. So I'm just going to slice this across here, and I'm going to slice this one at about the same height across here. And yeah, that's what I expected. This is cool. So this will be a neat cross section here. So this cross section, you can see it's pretty simple on the sepal. I'm going to draw, let's see, where does this cross section come in? It comes in about here. So I'm going to go like this. I'm going to just draw a dash, 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 dash across here. And here is A prime. And this is going to give me a little curve, slightly thicker towards the middle. And I can see these little kind of sections or walls in it. Where those little rigid, those grooves are, seems that they're maybe almost like little septa or something kind of going between those. And this is cross section A. Oh, was that done off screen? But look at the cross section of the petal. Isn't that cool? So you can see that it kind of has this bird look to it. There is this, oh, that's not in focus. But that when I do a cross section, I can, let's see how far down this is. Here's my cross section across here. This is B, B prime, and cross section B has this. Let's see, there's a bowl and a wing that comes out from it. And then that's going to connect into this thing that sticks down. But the thing that sticks down, actually, I didn't see this until I had the cross section made, has this cool little indent to it. This is overall thinner than the sepal. So the sepal was thicker. Do you want the cutting board?
Yeah.
There you go, honey. So isn't that cool? It looks like a bird flying towards me. I mean, that's so slick. So really interesting to do. So then I'm writing in Y midrib. Maybe I guess that's stiffening it. This one I guess gets stiff because it's thicker. So different strategies, very different structures. That's going to be my petal. It'd be fun to color these, but I'm not going to color those right now because we have more structures to play with. We're going to continue our way up. Look at this now. Look at what's inside. Isn't that fun? Look at these structures here. Oh yeah, petal. We had 3 of those. Look at those, Nia. Do you want to take one of these off? All right, so I'm going to very carefully remove these structures. They're in a ring. So the next level is these guys. Hello. Yeah. These are wonderful. You want one? All right. These are the next level here. These are what are called the stamen. Right? These are the parts of the plant that hold the pollen. And if you look at the structure of it, there's this upper part here that contains the pollen, and then there's a stalk. So that is with the part that holds the pollen, that's called the anther. And the stalk to that is the filament. So the anther and the filament are the 2 parts of this. I'm going to go back to my purple, and I'm just going to put these in my next ring here. And so I'm putting in my anthers, and what those, my filaments, I should say. And my anthers are attached onto the top of that. And different species of plants will have different shaped filaments, some very short.
Jack, can you slide your page down just a little?
Thank you very much. Some very short, some are long, some are attached. How they're attached, are they attached to the receptacle? On some plants, the stamen will come down and they'll attach to petals. But this one here, they all attached right in there on that receptacle. And I'm going to draw a line here from the word that says anther to the anther, and we'll draw a line from the word filament to the filament. When I get to put this onto my paper here, this is going to be really fun because there's a lot of interesting structure. What I want to do is just to get myself to geek out with each one of these little pieces. And so here is the size of this. It's going to come down like that. And from this angle, I can see that my anther has two big sides to it, and it's pointed at the bottom. This would be another place where a cross section will be very interesting. Thank you. Thank you, Mia. And it's just given me one of these guys to make a cross section of. Amelia, do you want to cut that one, that anther? Oh, look, I made my filament too narrow. Right? It's got this. This is cool. It starts off skinny, but then it gets thick towards the base. So I want to get my drawing to reflect that. Oh, cool. Thank you. So Amelia has sliced this for me, and we'll see if our camera can focus on this. I'll almost come up back. Oh, here, I'll do this. If I hold this up like this. Yeah, look at that. So it has 4 tubes. There's a central green section and 4 tubes. So each one of these, oh, yeah. I get it. So check this out. I'm going to draw a little cross section across here. So this is going to be cross section C and C prime. So cross section C, I'm going to do an enlargement of it. There is 1 tube. There is a second tube. There is a 3rd tube here. There is a 4th tube here, and then there's a green little section inside. This is C. And if I want to, I can also turn this into a 3-dimensional drawing like this. Just to show that those are kind of rolls on the side. Thank you, Mia. It's just given me a cross section of another one. Let's see if we can get the camera to focus on that.
It's half.
Oh, that's 1/2 of it. So I'm seeing 2 tubes. So she sliced it down this way. So she's cut off 2 of those tubes. So that's just 2 of those. Oh, that's really cool. Thank you, Mia. So isn't that fun? So I'm going to just draw this up here. Ooh. So you get into each of your plants, you're going to find all sorts of different structures. This is also worth a cross section here. Here's cross section. Here is cross section D. Notice that the filament is flattened, And so I can show that in my drawing here by D and D prime. And that is cross section D. Now I'm going to just kind of to refer to the scale of this. This is once, twice, and a half. This is magnified 2 times 2.5x. And I figured out that level of magnification because I could take this stem and put it once here, twice there, and then about a half. This little thing here, I use the actual thing as my measuring tool. So I've got 1, 2, 3. This is about 4x. 4 times life size. So each one of these structures has got secrets. And botanists will get into like how these things slice open, all this kind of cool stuff. So getting in there and diagramming your flower and all the parts just opens up all these worlds of structure. This next one, I'll be very gentle with that one because we've only got one. The next piece is going to be the pistil. And the pistil, I'm going to jump back to my blue pencil for drawing in the pistil. Let's take a look at this. Can I borrow that guy? Look at this. Oh, that is ridiculous, right? There's 3 clear sections to it. Look at the top. Isn't that neat? Beautiful little 3-part top. And each that's divided, there's sort of a piece side in the middle of it. Swollen ends, then there's this long stalk that comes down, and then there's this thing on the bottom of it. Wow. So 3 parts, and look, we've got 3 names over here, stigma style ovary, and that's what these are. This is top is the sticky pad where pollen from another plant comes in and touches that, and it gets stuck in the sticky pad. That's my stigma. The style is this tube that comes down from it, and the ovary is the part below that has originally the ovules in it, little proto-seeds, and those develop inside the ovary into seeds. So stigma, style, and ovary. And I'm now going to go to blue, and I am going to put in, there's my ovary. There is my style. And out here is going to be my stigma. Isn't that slick? So stigma, style, and ovary. And all I have to do now is just draw a little line here. Style and ovary. How are we going to get to that one without making this confusing? Oh, I think we're going to come over here. That was clear. All right, so stigma, style, and ovary. And when you get to draw those, this as like, so obviously you know we're going to geek out with this structure there, right? What is the pollen receptive part like? That's neat. That's really, really cool. So I have this, well, first I might just want to draw this thing life size. And then I want to geek out on this part here. What does the receptive sticky pad look like? And has a neat little groove that goes down the middle of it. And at a micro level, it's got these little tiny bumps. I want to get in there and paint that because that's a wonderful color. Small bumps. There's a little bit of a seam that comes in here, here, and here. And this is the sort of thing we also, if you get this under a magnifying glass, it's really fun. So does the stalk that comes down, the style here, is it a triangle or round? I don't know. Let's find out. Right there underneath the head, it's a triangle. Oh, okay. That's cool. And yeah, each one of those, and it's hollow on the inside. Okay, so this, I didn't see that coming. This stalk coming down here, this is, you see DE, is and that's 2x. And this is E. That's cool, but is it still a triangle down further? Well, let's find out. And I will have to get out my magnifying glass, I think. I am seeing a little bit of triangular structure. But a little bit more subtle. But then things are crazy fun, though, when you get to making cross sections of ovaries. And this is, the ovaries are actually often have a lot of really interesting information for botanists. So botanists, when they're keying things out, are very often cutting open ovaries and looking at the structures in there. And of course, that's going to change as the plant is developing. But let's just snip this here. And take a look at that structure. Can we get some focus? Wow. Right. So this is also something that I want to get in and put under a hand lens or a magnifying glass. But I'm seeing this sort of three-part structure. And so that's cool. So if I cut this here, I have a pattern that is 1, 2, 3. And if I cut that further down the line, sort of in the middle, it looks very similar. Okay. But that's something that I would just want to I want to diagram that. I mean, that's some beautiful geometry right there in this thing. Um, and all this becomes even more fun when I get to add color to it. So that's how I would do a kind of a dissection of a flower. You see, what I'm doing is petals, these are stamen. Stamen is the collective word for the anther and the filament. The collective word for the stigma, style, and ovary, that's called the pistil. And on plants, the parts that create pollen, where there's a tiny little spore that goes, or a little spore that kind of goes over to a larger structure on another plant to make a seed. The part that makes pollen, these are generally considered the male parts of the plants. They're just contributing a small little packet of genetic information that is the pollen. And the part that does all the work over here, the pistil, these are considered the female structures on the plant. And these are the things that are going to do all the work of making seeds. So they take that genetic information, mix it with their own, and they're going to then take those ovules and develop them into seeds inside of here. It's fun to also dissect ovaries of plants in different stages of development. So this is a really, these rings and these structures, you're going to see these on all sorts of different plants. And then what happens is the arrangement of them gets kind of interesting. For instance, sometimes the stamen will be attached onto petals instead of the receptacle. Sometimes on flowers, they will have all of these different parts. So they'll have petals, and this is petals and sepals and stamens and pistils. If that is what the flower has, that flower is referred to as a complete flower. So a complete flower is it has all the parts. On other flowers, they may have lost some of these structures. So some plants, for instance, on a plant that is wind pollinated, they may not have need for showy petals, and they may have lost the petals. So if there's parts of these structures that are not on a specific plant, when you look at the flower, if it doesn't have all these parts, that is what's called an incomplete flower. So parts are missing. And sometimes that the incomplete flower, if it has in it the stamens and the pistil, it is a perfect incomplete flower. So perfect flowers, ones with a stamen and a pistil, those are, so that is, it has the male and the female parts. That's referred to as a perfect flower, and that's a subcategory of incomplete flowers. Of course, a complete flower has them both. But a incomplete flower may be just missing something like the petals, in which case it is still a perfect flower. An imperfect flower is one that is either missing the female parts on that flower or the male parts on that flower. And there's two ways of setting this up. One is, if you look at a single branch, for instance, the other day I was looking at an alder tree, And on the branches of the alder tree, there were these little catkins, little pods of male flowers, little clusters of male flowers that were out on the tips of the branches. Another way to think of this is a cattail. Let's go for a cattail. I'm going to draw a little cattail bulb here. You know, cattail has the hot dog part, and then there's the spike on top. These are thousands of flowers. And all the ones down here below are all female flowers. And all the ones up above on the spike are male flowers. On my alder, down below or lower on the branch, it has these little female catkins. So it's got the female parts down here and the male parts up here. So if one plant has male and female flowers, but they are just on different parts of the plant, that's referred to as a monoecious plant, meaning in one house, mono one. Other plants are set up like this. If you go around a no coyote bush, you'll walk around in some coyote bushes. So here's coyote bush number 1. And over here on the ground, here's you. Right? Here's coyote bush number 2. On coyote bush number 1, you will find all female flowers. They're these things that kind of, you'll see these little seeds that kind of come off and they'll just float around. And they'll be turned kind of cottony because they get all these seeds all over them. Other ones, you don't see that. They've got these little tiny male flowers. So you see here, the male flowers are on one part of the plant, the female flowers are on the other plant. That is what's called dioecious, meaning in 2 houses, dioecious. And so when you're looking at a flower, you're not always going to find all these parts. I'm just going to really quickly take a look at one more flower here. This one here, just so we can see a different way of organizing these. So here's this cool flower. Thank you, Trader Joe's. And on this one here was a superior ovary. Take a look at the ovary position on this one. Notice that the ovary is below the flower. This one here is an inferior ovary. Right? So on this one here, check this out. I'm going to take off, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to take off the sepals, and I'll line those up here for you. All right, so that's how the sepal looks on this little plant. And now I'm going to take off the petals. Look at how different the petal looks from the sepals. Oops. These stamen are now starting to fall off in my hand here. So I've got stamen that are falling off. Didn't want them coming off yet, but also can look at how different this little arrangement is from what we're looking at before. Wouldn't it be interesting to cut that one open? What would you see? Also, 2 of these have anthers on them. The rest of them don't. Have those anthers fallen off? Some plants have infertile stamen that stick up around them. So is that the case? Well, I could probably figure that out by just looking at another one. Ah, yeah, here's the answer to that. I take a look at another one, and you see on this one, it's got more of those attached. So just some of those have fallen off. But then look at what is left on the inside. When I take all those off in a ring, I discover that there's actually one of those little stalks that is coming right through the center. It's not on the outside. If this one comes right through the middle, what is that structure? That is my pistil sticking up. And or the stigma and the style, the ovary being down below. So if I were to diagram this one, I would have my receptacle kind of coming up here, my ovary here, and then the rest part of the receptacle kind of wraps around this thing. And to kind of keep my same color scheme, my ovaries in the center, my stigma comes up on top of that. I'm going to have my stamen now emerging. It looks like above the ovary, but really there's part of my receptacle that is just wrapped around here. Down one more layer, I have my petals. And on the outside of that, I have my sepals. What I am going to encourage you to do is to, let me see if I can find the Jack Cam again. With your own flowers, let's find, for now, we're going to be ignoring daisy-like things. We're going to be ignoring the sunflowers, right? The reason for that is that they actually are this incredible cluster of flowers. So when you find a daisy, it's not a flower, it's actually an inflorescence of flowers. And so we'll be doing that in subsequent classes. So find yourself something that is sort of where you've got a single flower, figure out, is this an inferior, is this a superior ovary, and diagram it. Petal for petal, sepal for sepal, and see where you want to use cross sections, where you want to use kind of diagramming, and kind of make a structural diagram of how this thing is put together. Think of this as the blueprints for making the flower. And here's the reason that this is important, is that there is a bit of a crisis in nature right now. And what has happened is that the pixies that are responsible for constructing flowers, they have in their workshop, they have all the blueprints for those. But the trolls actually got into that lab a week ago and stole those blueprints. You realize the implication of this is that we may have no more flowers if we are not able to get blueprints again. So fortunately, there are still some of the flowers which were made before the blueprints were stolen are actually out. And what we need to do is to reverse engineer the blueprints for making these flowers. And so what I would like you to do is to, in your journal, is to diagram the blueprints for making a flower. And so the blueprints, there's going to be a couple of things. One is you need to show how all the different parts fit together. And what you also need is the design details for each of those components of that to come together. So the pixies really need our help on this. So that's why I'm reaching out to all of you to create your own set of design documents and blueprints for a flower. Again, for now, we're not going to be touching those the sunflowers. Those actually currently, it seems that some of those blueprints survived, so we don't need those. So for ones where you've got an individual flower, let's create and share those blueprints. You can actually look online at blueprints for ideas and inspiration of, if you kind of want to really kind of geek out and make it look like blueprints, you can. But you're going to find that when you approach it with that kind of frame of mind, like somebody's really going to have to rebuild this flower based on the notes that I take and details that you don't include in your design documents may be neglected in future versions of these flowers. So you realize the importance of this challenge. So let's do that. The pixies, good news is they are actually technologically savvy. They're on Facebook. And so if you share some of those design documents for flowers on our Facebook page, the pixies will be able to get them. So I hope you have fun with this challenge and really let yourself get curious about these plants and these structures. It's a ton of fun to get in there and geek out with those. And let's see what you discover. And thank you so much for joining us today. So I have not been monitoring the chat, but I understand there's some really interesting questions and comments that kind of came up in the chat. And if people want to ask some of those, or if folks in our community, actually there's a question, could I summarize your drawings once? Yes, let me just kind of jump back to this thrill cam, and I will sort of kind of just review what we did and kind of give you the big picture. So there's two things. One is, how do the parts fit together? The other is, what do the parts look like? And let's jump there now. Bing. All right. So when you're doing this, you're making a diagram showing how these different parts fit together. And what you've got is your pedestal coming up, the receptacle, and different rings attaching to that. And each one of those parts has a different structure. So you can, in your kind of the details that you make, you can show what the structure of this anther is, and what the structure of the filament is. You don't have to have that all on this drawing. This drawing will get too crowded. The purpose of this is to show the pixies where to attach these different parts relative to each other. You don't want them putting the anthers on the outside. And then what you're going to do is, in your journal, you are going to be making the design of, how does your receptacle look? How does your, whatever is going on with your sepals? What about the petals? You're going to use cross sections where you think those will be really appropriate to help show the differences between things, or to sort of the subtleties of a structure. So you get to decide where a cross section is helpful. You get to decide which angles, which views are going to be really the most clear. We want to use measurements. We want to use our words. Remember, describing things as thick, rubbery. What is its texture like? What are things that you can't really show with your picture very well that you can show better with your words? So let's use those words, pictures, and numbers together. You also have a bunch of strategies. What view? Think about architects. Sometimes they draw a house from the top down. Sometimes they draw it from the side. Sometimes it's a 3/4 view. And you're deciding which view is going to really convey the information that you want to convey in the way that will be the most clear. And you also can have a lot of fun with it.